Quite a week for the state of Ohio and the city of Akron. We're going to talk about budgets. We're going to talk about the federal flush regarding Akron sewers, even public jobs in Akron. That's all coming up next on NewsNite. And welcome to this edition of NewsNite. I'm Ed Esposito in for Eric Mansfield. He has the night off dealing with some family issues. We wish him the best during this troubled time. Certainly troubled time for the state of Ohio. How would you like to be the governor and have to fill a massive $8 billion hole in the budget? Well, that's exactly what Governor John Kasich has to do, and on Tuesday night, he took to the airwaves and the internet to present his side of the story. Stephanie Warsmith was there. We'll talk with her about it in just a moment. Phil Trexler will join us from the Akron Beacon Journal, but for now, let's put Governor Kasich on center stage. Here's the governor talking about what he wants to do with the local government fund.
There are changes, of course, to the local government fund. I see Valerie here from the city of Cleveland. There's going to be a lot of concern about this. Again, that we have things that we think mitigate the damage, including the increase in money they will get from casinos. But Randy Cole is here for a short presentation to talk about how we need to drag our local communities, our local schools, towns, and cities into the 21st century. Randy?
Thank you, Governor. You mentioned that rising tide to lift all boats. Unfortunately, here in Ohio, we are suffering through rising costs. And in fact, if you apply that thinking forward to all of the schools, the universities, the cities, the villages, the libraries, we have 3,700 separate units of government that I believe are tied to the docks with over 200 years of red tape. We have 4 strategies the governor's asked us to employ. Or we like to think of it as 4 pieces to the puzzle: reducing mandates, using 21st century technology, increasing the use of shared services, and increasing government flexibility and cost containment.
All right, let's transition now from Governor Kasich's town hall meeting and clips of that. We'll have more coming up in the program tonight to our local trio of scoundrels. Of course, Phil Trexler from the Akron Beacon Journal joins us this morning. We're going a little bit out of range here, and immediately to my right is Stephanie Warsmith from the Akron Beacon Journal. And Stephanie, you were at the speech, you were at the briefing, which eventually was allowed with cameras and microphones, I would point out, after a little bit of a stumble earlier that day. What did you take out of this from what you saw and heard in Columbus?
Well, as you mentioned in your introduction, Ed, the governor had a huge task here, and it would be difficult for anyone to make up an $8 billion shortfall. And so what we saw and what everyone, I think, was anticipating was massive, massive changes in this budget. You know, he's going to sell prisons. He's going to privatize the Division of Liquor Control to try to create jobs. He is slashing the local government fund, you know, reforming Medicaid, and so it is expansive, and so now it will be very interesting to see what the also Republican-controlled legislature is going to do with this. You know, as it moves its way through the process. They have to have a budget in place by June 30th. Lots of difficult choices here. You know, some winners, some losers, lots more losers than winners.
What exactly is the transformational aspect of this? I'm still incredibly confused. I'm watching the give and take and the reaction to it in real time on Twitter and Facebook, and then following this flurry of here's what this really means from folks who are weighing in from every side, some who got stuck big, others who said that they kind of like this. Phil, what was your take on kind of the reaction on this?
I thought the reaction on education was what I found most troubling is you know, the headlines in some of the newspapers were that, you know, education took the biggest hit. And there's some debate there as to whether they're really taking the hit that is being said or not.
Quite a bit of debate. I mean, it almost seems like there's an argument that he's spending more money, but he's really not spending more money, and there seems to be a lot of confusion of that, and districts still don't know where they land.
Yeah, exactly, and they're feeling very uncomfortable. These are districts that are already, you know, feeling the pinch. You know, every year there's budget concerns and talk of levies and funding, and it's just gotten worse. And then you throw in SB 5 in there too. Mm-hmm. It creates a very uncomfortable atmosphere. And you know, Stephanie's our expert there on the budget and on education. She covered education, and I think it's up to us to try to decipher exactly how bad the hit is, if there is a hit. I mean, Kasich's talking that he's giving more money to schools.
Right.
So.
Education is fascinating. Let's listen to this little clip. Let's go to the videotape or go to the computer file here, if we can, and hear what the governor has to say on education.
We have a very significant reform agenda on K through 12. Ohio can no longer accept the fact that we're not giving our kids all the chance and all the opportunity they deserve. We're going to have our Dr. Summers here go through the list, but in a nutshell, we're doubling vouchers. We're lifting the cap on. We're going to lift the cap on charters, but we're not going to let bad folks or people who don't know what they're doing run that program. You fail once, you don't get a second chance. You're in a failing school. We're going to give teachers an opportunity to take that school over. We're going to give parents an opportunity to take that school over. We're going to test people in failing schools. We're going to reward teachers. If teachers can teach a kid more than 1 year's worth of content, we're going to reward them. We're going to pay them for that. We're going to do a lot of things that are going to move education. And Teach for America is coming to a schoolhouse near you, okay? The system is changing.
Stephanie, you obviously heard what the governor had to say. You had the benefit of having a kind of more in-depth briefing, kind of, I would imagine, a more robust Q&A than just the governor up on a stage. How do you make sense of all this?
Well, it is very complicated, and but the budget always is, I think, because it's a 774-page document, and so with education, you have lots of different types of funding, and then, as you mentioned, the districts, the spreadsheet that shows how much individual districts are going to get in each of the 2 years of the state budget hasn't come out yet. We haven't seen that yet, and so within the districts, or among the districts, I should say, there will likely be winners and losers. But you have the governor putting more money into vouchers, which allows people to take their this money and go to a private school rather than a public school.
Which doesn't make the school unions very happy, or public schools
right.
very happy.
And then you also have the governor lifting the cap on charter schools, which vouchers and charters are two very popular education items among Republicans. And, so you have that issue, and then you also have a major change with the tangible personal property taxes that go to districts. They were being phased out, and the governor essentially, is removing them completely, although districts and municipalities that heavily rely on them, he's going to hold them harmless for a certain amount of time. And so you just really have a lot going on here. And I think, as Phil mentioned, as you mentioned, that a lot of people are still sifting through this and trying to figure out, what does this mean for me?
I saw a piece from the Buckeye Institute, which is a conservative-leaning think tank based in Toledo, and their take on this was that the governor's actually spending more money than his predecessor did. Is that true? Well,
the basic aid is the amount that goes to districts. And so if you just look at that, then the overall number, then it actually is going up. But then you have to kind of delve down into the data and see, when you move out the tangible personal property taxes, when you consider other changes that are in there, what is that ultimately going to mean for education? And so that's why I think, if you look at it overall, that public education, doesn't come out a winner here.
I was struck, Phil, that in one of the stories that I saw following this, that the budget director, basically the local governments now, if we move and talk about the impact on local governments, I know Mayor Plisqualik was pretty quick to point out, well, we're going to be here talking about laying off cops and firefighters again. But the budget director, I actually smirked when I read this quote, was basically, did you not see this coming? We've been talking about this over and over. This is kind of a rock and a hard place for anybody in public office right now.
Oh, yeah.
Shy of pounding people with higher taxes, there's no way to get out of this. And it seems to me that, personally, that there wasn't any discipline and understanding that all this money was one-time money, even though they talked about it. They really didn't structure budgets on the fact that it wasn't going to be around anymore.
Right, and it's a challenge that Kasich has. Here he is, he's made these promises of not raising taxes, but yet he's facing an $8 billion deficit. Something's got to give there, and you're right, it is a rock and a hard place. And the perception is that some of these dollars are supposed to be there forever, and they're not. And when you make that pledge not to not to raise taxes, and in fact in some areas he's cutting it, you're going to have issues when you're trying to cut a budget, and there's going to be some massive fallout here.
Real quick, we're going to go a little long on this segment, but I do want to have another clip of Governor Kasich here and talking about the transformative nature, where he's talking about using money from the Liquor Control Board, the money that we spend for all of our scotch and whiskey these days, to actually fund economic development. Let's listen to the governor.
Ohio controls the liquor business. There's not a handful of states that do that. Private individuals, investors, would love to buy this liquor business. It's a guaranteed slam dunk. Mark told me one night, he called me up, he said, I'm quitting. I said, what do you mean? You've been here a week. He said, yeah, I'm going to buy the liquor business, make a fortune, okay? So what we did is, rather than to sell it to a private investor, which we didn't think made good sense for the use of a privatization of this asset, that if we moved it into Jobs Ohio, and I can tell you we're going to bond against it and there'll be a revenue flow and all that, but basically what happens is there's a growth in the amount of dollars that gets spun off. We then take liquor, which has been basically used to kind of run different things in the general revenue fund, and we take it, we transform it, we stick it in Jobs Ohio, and every year we get more revenue to be used to offer the benefits that we need to help companies to expand and to go to other places in the country and bring businesses here. So it is, look, it's the 21st century, folks. These are the things we need to do in order to push ahead.
Stephanie, when we talk about the transformative nature, when the governor talks about bringing us into the 21st century, using the idea of sin taxes to fund job creation really isn't very new. I mean, Cuyahoga County did this when they slammed tobacco products to build Gateway, supposedly on the theory that it was going to create all these jobs.
Well, the governor is making a lot of large changes in this. He is, rather than having the Ohio Department of Development, he's creating a new private Jobs Ohio, and this is going to be the private arm of offshoot of the state government that is going to try to work on economic development now. And so, to come up with a funding source for this, his idea is to lease the Division of Liquor Control, and all of that money, then they will sell bonds on it, and that will create the money for economic development. So it's certainly an interesting idea. I think that the governor cannot be accused of not trying some out of the box ideas here. One of the criticisms that I've heard from the Democratic side is that the Republicans criticized Strickland for the one-time money with the stimulus, and that Kasich in his budget is really depending on the one-time money from the asset sales, from what they're going to get from the Division of Liquor Control, and then from selling the 5 prisons, and that is built into at least the first year of this 2-year budget, and so that's an issue that they point to.
Phil and Stephanie and I are going to continue this conversation on NewsNite.net, so go there and watch the rest of our conversation regarding the state budget.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
And welcome back to NewsNite. I'm Ed Esposito, substituting for host Eric Mansfield. We talked a lot about the state budget. Let's talk a little bit about the city budget and the issue that it just won't go away, no matter how many times you pull the handle. Federal Judge John Adams this week decided to throw a major monkey wrench into what should have been a deal, what both sides had hoped was going to be a deal between the Environmental Protection Agency and City of Akron. Give us a little bit of background on this.
Well, in a nutshell here, the EPA and Akron came to an agreement.
Call it a consent decree.
A consent decree, right. Akron has some issues, just like 200 or whatever other cities across the country have issues with their aging sewer system. The discharge, where it's going into, after it's treated and whatnot, it goes into our waterways. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a problem there. It's a huge problem. Everyone acknowledges it. Fixing it also carries a huge price tag, which we all know about. Akron has been accused in some respects of dragging their feet for the past 20 years. We've been reporting on this problem for 20 years. Some will say that Akron has been looking the other way instead of trying to fix it. Well, now there was a lawsuit eventually filed last year or in 2009 by the EPA against the city saying, let's go. You got to fix your problem.
Right.
And so they've been working toward a consent decree, a plan submitted by Akron to the EPA to fix the issue, how much it's going to cost, what you're going to do, when it's going to be completed. Essentially, it's going to take over 20 years and cost, I think, about $600 million. Ballpark figures.
But Judge Adams says no to this.
Yesterday, Adams comes in and says, and he's been hinting all along that he was not hip
and he's
on
in favor of something that costs twice as much.
He is, but gets done in half the time.
Okay.
Okay. Adams came out and said he's been saying all along that it's just Akron, you've been dragging your feet on this. This thing needs to be done. It needs to be done quickly. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny that the city, he's critical of the city for saying they're crying poor, and he points out that they spent in this last 20 years they spent $10 million on parking lots and parking decks, and $10 million more than they did on their sewers. So this might be heading toward a trial unless something drastic changes it.
And I do want to note that also on NewsNite.net, that's NEWSNITE.net, you'll be able to see Jody Miller's full interview with Rick Marola, the Public Service Director for the City of Akron, talking exactly about this in more detail. Why not give the city the time they need to do this, where they're not, for lack of a better term, screwing over every user who flushes a toilet or turns on a water spigot? It has to go somewhere, but now who's going to pay that bill? The feds aren't going to pay it for sure, are they?
Well, that's one of the things that Rick Marola and the mayor, Don Plasquelik, have been saying all along during this process, is that the federal government used to give money to cities to help fix sewer problems, and lately they have not. And so they've actually been arguing for more time to fix the problem that they have, and then also trying to lobby for the federal government to help with this expense. So far, that has not amounted to anything. The federal government, like all levels of government, has its own budget funding problems, and so they aren't offering any money up here.
But you can kind of see Judge Adams' point of you have to or get off the pot. And thank God for stories like this that actually give us the ability to be snide.
Yeah,
with,
but
snarky comments. But the truth of the matter is, we're $1 billion. Now we're talking serious money.
Right, and I'm going to have to pay it because I live in the city.
And your kids are going to have to pay it, and your kids are going to have to pay it. But I thought it was interesting that Judge Adams makes a clear distinction of how important this is because of the impact on the national park.
Right.
Clearly, because Akron's sewer system is on the Cuyahoga River, which then flows into the national park. It's just part of that whole thing. It gives it a different sense of flair than, say, telling Newark, New Jersey, you need to do this because of what you're sending in the Hudson River.
Sure. And guess who jogs through the park?
Judge Adams.
Judge Adams.
Very good.
Uses the park. And
well, so do I, though.
And
so
do thousands of other people.
I mean, it's one of the most popular parks in
Absolutely.
terms of
Absolutely.
in terms
it's
of
one
use.
of our greatest resources too
in
this area.
So can you disagree with Judge Adams saying that you need to clean this up because this has an impact on something that impacts people's quality of life on such a huge level?
Well, this is Dad calling the kid, this disbehaving kid into the woodshed here. This is he gave him a spanking.
I did think that it was telling in the story that we had in the paper today, which Bob Downing wrote, and I believe Phil helped out with, that the Crooked River Group, which is the grassroots group that has been following this all along and has been really arguing we need this done, to clean up the river, they were very disappointed in the judge's decision because they realized that if this goes through 3 trials, which is what would be required, and then goes through a litany of appeals after that we're talking about a major delay in solving the issue.
So this will be another 5 to 10 years?
It could, unless something, like Phil said, unless something happens here, it goes through the trial process, and then there's most definitely going to likely be appeals.
These trials take forever, and when you're talking 3 of them, nothing happens quickly in court. And
especially federal court.
Especially federal court. Although, let's not be critical. The judges work hard there, and they do,
I'm just saying it's more deliberate. It's a longer process.
Let's point out, too, that this decision by Adams is going to be appealed to the Sixth Circuit, and that could, they could approve it and kick it back. But, yeah, people do have a concern. It's going to further delay because it's going to continue the fights because the city's not going to sit back and say, okay, we're going to we're going to spend $1 billion and get it done in a decade. It's not going to happen.
Of course, I want to drive you again to NewsNite.net. Jody Miller had a great interview with Rick Marola to give more impact on what the city's perspective is.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
And we're back at it here from the Golden Studios at Franklin Hall at Kent State University. I want to talk about public jobs, and in particular, let's talk about 2 jobs in the city of Akron. We're going to start first with the Chief of Police. We have finalists.
And then there were 3.
It didn't take as long as the sewer case has, but it has taken a number of years before we've gotten to this point where we're actually looking at a new permanent police chief.
Right.
But what's fascinating about this, as you've pointed out, is you have finalists who have visited Akron but not lived here.
They have, well, actually, one of the guys, I think, at least one of the guys, is a Kenmore grad.
Okay.
James Nice. And we talked about this on the show about a month ago.
But he's not working here for the Akron Police Department.
Exactly. This is going to be the first time in Akron Police history that a chief will come from outside the department. And that alone is cause for consternation among the ranks. Yeah, they were down to 3 finalists. James Nice, who's out of the FBI in Quantico. He's a Kenmore grad. You got David Moore, who is a retired Rochester police, and you have a David Morris, who is the high-ranking officer with Prince George's in Maryland.
Suburban Washington, D.C.
Exactly. He has a regional police department.
Ooh.
And it's funny, I think the crystal ball here about a month ago showed that these guys were the leading candidates, and lo and behold, these 3 rose to the top. They all bring good credentials, great credentials, clean records apparently into the mix here. What's next is they're going to form a search committee. They're going to use some community leaders here. They're also going to incorporate the PERF folks in the search and do an interview process, and eventually Don Pasquale will be the ultimate decision maker on this.
PERF is the Police Executive Research Firm Foundation,
Right.
Something along those lines. So actually you're working as consultants. How fraught is this with all sorts of politics? I mean, obviously the mayor's running for re-election. He has a serious primary challenger. Who he picks as police chief, I'm assuming now it's going to be one of these 3. I think that's a logical assumption, although they could always say, no, we need to go, we need to do more. How much of a risk is for this, and how careful does he have to be? Or is he already set the standard and say someone from out of town's coming in, guys?
Well, this, I think, has been in the planning process for some time. The Akron Police Department has no deputy chiefs right now, and so that is one of the things that has enabled the mayor to go outside of the department. The mayor and Marco Somerville, the president of council, for a while have been saying that because of problems with the department, that they think that someone needs to be brought in from outside. As Phil mentioned, this is not popular with the rank and file, with the union. They are used to, obviously, in the department's history, it's always been someone who's risen up through the ranks and come from inside the department.
But don't we live in an era of that argument of, like, that's not the way we've done it before? It gets thrown out so much. I mean, I think of management at my radio station. I think of management at the newspaper that come in from out of town,
right?
And learn the community and still manage to do a decent job.
I'll tell you what. I know a few of the captains over there. They're offended by this process. They feel slighted. They feel as though they've done a remarkable job there. They have weeded out the bad seeds over the years. They've done a great job of policing themselves. And for the mayor to essentially say that you are not qualified to lead this department, they find that to be greatly offensive. And I think that's the major issue. It's not so much who it is coming in or they're coming from outside the department. It's the mayor saying to those leaders over there, you're not good enough. I don't trust you to lead the department.
Big question on this, yes or no. Whoever comes into this job, if it's among those 3, do they suffer a payback in their relationship with the FOP and the rank and file because of it?
I think it's going to be rocky. I think it's going to be a tough job to fill. They're going to have to command respect. They're going to have to, bridge this communication problem there, and it's going to be, a rocky start.
Stephanie?
Oh, I agree, and I think that the relationship, they have to worry about not only their relationship within the department and with the union, but also their relationship with the administration and with council, and so it's going to be a tough task.
Quickly, with about a minute to go here, let's talk very briefly about Ward 8. We now have a slate of candidates the council will consider. Another interesting political hire at a time, has a mayor ever won the city without Ward 8? So whoever they put in Ward 8, there's actually some political thought here as to having a good turnout on the primary level that would help the incumbent, but not necessarily put someone in there who's a stiff. What do you do?
Right. There's talk about possibly putting that they may put a placeholder in, so to speak, for right now to ensure that there is a primary, when it comes time, because that drives people in Ward 8, which is the ward that normally draws the most people out to the polls, and that will make more people come out and vote.
Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see. Frankly, I'm going to predict Marilyn Keith to be named into the position over Bolden and Hardy. Keith is the wife of the former Bob Keith, the former councilman in that area. She's a hard worker. A lot of folks have said she was actually the, more than just the wife of a councilman. She was a campaigner. She was a strong worker. She fielded those phone calls. So watch for her to be named the replacement there in Ward 8.
Very interesting. Phil Trexler and Stephanie Warsmith from the Beacon Journal with us. I also wanted to just offer a very quick note, our condolences as well, to the family of Judge Brenda Burnham Unruh, laid to rest Wednesday night in a wonderful ceremony at the chapel, and certainly she'll be missed. I didn't want to have this program go without mentioning that. Also, by this time you watch this program, you know how the Zips in Ohio State did, but also congratulations to Kent State in the NAT, also the College of Worcester Fighting Scots, and certainly Walsh University for great basketball seasons too. For Eric Mansfield, I'm Ed Esposito. Have a great night.